Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. My name is Ranger Dana, and I will be your park ranger and your guide this evening as we explore together a piece of Cuyahoga Valley's history. So before we get started, I'm going to do a real quick word association here. And you can just shout it out, you don't need to raise your hands. But what do you think of when I say the word struggle? What are some words or phrases that come to mind?
Fight.
Fight?
Fight.
Tension.
Tension.
Conflict.
Conflict.
Hardship.
War. Hardship. War.
Getting out of bed in the morning.
That is sometimes a struggle as well. Very good. All right, well, so I have another question for you. This one we're going to dig a little bit deeper. And instead of talking to me, you're going to talk to each other a little bit. So we're going to kind of group up in groups of about 3 or 4. You can just turn to your neighbor. You don't have to stand up. I know you've been doing a lot of up and down. But the question I'd like you to discuss briefly with your neighbors is, if you needed help, who would you turn to and why? If you needed help, who would you turn to and why? So turn to your neighbors, get in a small group. I'll give you a few minutes to talk about it.
The expert in that field.
Yeah, that's true. The internet is good, you know?
Right, but you believe everything you see. Right. So that's always a good start.
Yeah. Authority. I mean, depending on handle that.
Or you have to help. Last time I didn't help.
Or computer where you're looking for knowledge.
Everybody else turns to the problem.
I think it used to be your church, but I don't think that's true anymore. Go to their church. I don't have so many.
So yeah, it depends on what it would be. So it would be one of the two. Do you have a sister or a best friend? See, it's yeah. I was like that.
During the day, I would be able to get her. My granddaughter works at Walmart, and sometimes I can get her, sometimes I can't. But my daughter is really difficult, and she's helped a lot. In fact, when I had my knee surgery, I went to her house, which is all one floor, so that she could help take care of me. Yeah. My husband would be on during the day. If I had to call somebody, I'd call her.
A few more seconds and wrap up your discussion. We'll come back as a big group. Everyone have a chance to share? All right. I'm not cutting you all off too soon. I was eavesdropping a little bit and I heard somebody, I didn't even think about this when I was drafting this question, but somebody said the internet. I thought that was really great. Like, wow. I heard some different responses, like family, like the police, like, you know, a lot of people saying it depends on the struggle. But I did like the internet. That was a good one. I turn to the internet for help a lot too.
Or the library.
Or the library, absolutely. So historically, people have turned to their family, to their neighbors, to friends, or to members of their community. They needed help. But during the Great Depression, with millions of Americans out of work or underemployed and struggling to feed their families and to get by, people turned to the government. And one of the ways that the government provided assistance was through federal work programs, one of which was the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC for short. The CCC provided a way for some people to lift themselves out of what had for many become dire circumstances and gave people hope for the future. This program was proposed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933 as a way to fight the rampant unemployment of our nation's young people at the time. Though I should say of our nation's young men, because the Civilian Conservation Corps was unfortunately not open to women. So the target audience was young men ages 18 through 25, and these men were put to work on our public lands. They planted trees, they fought fires, they prevented floods, fought erosion, and built and maintained infrastructure, roads, power lines, dams, trails, and structures, like one that's maybe really close to us right now. Many of you know where I'm going. But these men were paid $1 a day, so $30 monthly salary, 25 of which was sent home to family or a dependent at the end of the month. And that was mandatory. You got to keep $5 of your hard-earned $30 at the end of the month. Spend it as you will, whether on personal toiletries or in town when you can hitch a ride into town on a Saturday night. But this program was massive in scale. So it required the collaboration from multiple branches of the government. The Department of Labor collected names of people who were on relief and recruited people to join the program. The Department of War was involved as well. The U.S. Army ran the day-to-day life at these camps. They provided medical screening for enrollees. They fed, clothed, and housed all these people. The Department of the Interior and the Department of Agriculture drafted and oversaw the projects that these people carried out. So it was a really, really massive effort. And something really remarkable about it was the speed with which it was implemented. 37 days was the time that elapsed between FDR's inauguration and the enrollment of the first CCC member. Only 37 days before this program was rolling. And by December of 1933, we had a camp right here in Cuyahoga Valley. And as many of you know, this shelter right behind us, this structure, was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, Company 5. So, with what you've heard so far about the Civilian Conservation Corps, $1 a day, hard labor, working outdoors, would anyone sign up for the Civilian Conservation Corps if you could step back in time? Well, I'm not too surprised with this crowd. A lot of people. I would. Let's imagine that women could join. I would join. A lot of people did join. So this program was approved at the end of March of 1933. And 3 months later, 250,000 men had already enrolled. Wow. 250,000. Mm-hmm. And
I got a question.
yes.
It goes to the question about whether you like big government or not. I happen to not like government and think it doesn't. Do you know the unemployment rate at the height of the Depression and what the unemployment rate was sometime later, say at the start of the Second World War?
No, I really couldn't quote those figures for you, but I do know that at the time...
25%, the height of the Depression.
Right.
25%.
Thank you. See, remember those years of life experience that we're drawing on here? Thank you. I didn't have that one in my back
What
pocket.
was the unemployment rate when the Second World War started? I bet it was about, it was 25% in the height of the Depression. It was probably about 15% when the Second World War started. And I would challenge, and I would suggest that the government created programs did not lower unemployment with other things that lowered the unemployment rate.
But there were other benefits from that program, that all that work progress America programs, because one of the biggest benefits was when we went to war, all of the young men who had been doing all the building were in excellent physical condition and went into went into the Army and Navy, and
They came out with skills to get deployment too.
Absolutely. You guys are giving my programs for me. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. See, I like this audience-centered approach. And I will address some of those things coming up here. We're skipping ahead a little bit, but that is okay. We're drawing on those years of experience. So at this time, I'm going to distribute, and you can pass around while we still have some light, some historical photos. And if you can pass those back and around, share. And while we look at these photos, again, while we still have light, oh, there's a bat right overhead as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
So these photos are from here in Cuyahoga Valley, our CCC company. There's some construction photos, some of which were construction of this shelter right here. And again, while we still have light, I'd like you to turn, if you can, and look at this structure. This is our, we have to take advantage of this moment. This is our tangible history. This is part of the legacy they left us. This structure was designed, it was designed to be simple because it had to be constructed by young men many of whom had limited experience working outdoors, limited experience building something. For some, this might have been their first job. So it was designed to be simple, but it was also designed, as in the words of the architect, to look as though it was made by pioneer craftsmen with limited hand tools. It was made with local sandstone and local blighted chestnut trees, with the idea that it would blend into the natural environment and provide the sense of timelessness. So I don't know if it's too dark for you to see those photos, but some of those are the construction of this structure, which was pretty cool for me researching this, seeing all of this. But as you mentioned earlier, this program was not all, and not everybody loved it. There were some folks who felt that this was their ticket, to get 3 square meals a day, to get a bed to sleep in at night, to have money at the end of the month, to be able to support a family, and have some left over for themselves at the end of the day. Provided some enrollees with a sense of pride that perhaps they had never felt before. Not having a job, roaming around the country, hopping on trains, looking for some work. But this program also had critics. As you mentioned, there were those who said it was a make-work program. There were folks who felt that this $1 a day would become the new gold standard for labor, and that it would drive down wages for existing forestry workers. There were accusations of communism and socialism. And the fact that the U.S. military was involved with running these camps led some folks to fear that it would lead to the militarization of that generation of youth. And you have to think of the context at this time. This was when Hitler and Mussolini were amassing their own personal armies, and there were folks who felt that maybe FDR was doing kind of the same thing out in the woods. Right? So not everyone loved this program. However, as someone mentioned, again, you're feeding me my points. I like it. Keep it coming. But this program did give young men skills that they could use. As many of you know, the advent of World War II essentially ended this program. It had a lifespan of about 9 years. Excuse me. It was never a permanent agency. Congress extended it many times as it was very popular. But when the war started, all that mobilization around that war effort essentially ended this program. So, we're almost out of time and we're almost out of light, but I'm going to ask you to get up out of your seats one more time this evening, because my final question for you, I'd like to step back into the present. Although we've changed as a society, we've changed in some ways dramatically from the Depression era, yet poverty and struggle remain in our society. And my question to you is there room in our society today for a program similar to the Civilian Conservation Corps? And we're gonna, you practiced this with Ranger Pam, but we're gonna have a continuum up here. On this side, yes, there is room. Or this may be a concept that could use today.
Many of those people that came to those camps were so weak they couldn't work. They had to feed them for quite a while to get them healthy enough to do that job.
Absolutely. The average enrollee gained like 15 pounds, kind of like the freshman 15, except for them, I think it was in muscle, not in cafeteria food. Thank you. All right, so our continuum. Is yes, this could be a relevant concept for our society today, and no, we've changed so much that this is perhaps not relevant anymore. And if you have a photo, I can take that.
That's in the middle.
In the middle, yeah. Please, in the middle. That's where
So which is our, which is
yes.
This is against.
No.
This is the against.
I
Society has changed.
information before I can decide.
They have to make some changes to do it. That's all.
I agree. All right. You guys are pros at this continuum thing now. Would anyone care to share why they're standing where they're standing? Yes.
Yes, I think it would be excellent if we could do programs like this because of all the people that need the jobs. However, I deal with a lot of our younger generation and getting them to do the simplest things sometimes. You know, there's too much. There's become a sense of entitlement that we have to combat.
In a program such as that, unless they're willing to do the work, they're not going to get anything else.
Right.
So
that's why I stand over here saying it would never work in today's environment, because the society, well, first of all, we went from the CCC program to welfare.
Right.
We've got people.
Well, we're not talking about welfare here.
But it substituted it. It gave people money to live on and eat.
Yeah, but this program wouldn't be welfare.
Okay, then we'll go on to another reason it won't work is you go up and down the streets, there's plenty of jobs out there. Everyone's looking for hiring. We're to the point where the people that aren't working don't want to work.
Well, then the program will just.
We're at the point where
there's a ton of jobs out there, part-time. You can't get a decent full-time
It's still
job.
money, it's still income.
Yes, and it's not enough to live on.
Support a family.
Some people are working 3 jobs. It just depends on what kind of energy level you have.
So absolutely. I'm interested in, you know, there's many different ideas about how we can solve this problem, but what about our society? I know you mentioned younger generations perhaps not feeling quite so desperate to go out and get a job. You know, what kind of solutions might we be able to find? And does it have to look completely different from the CCC? And can this concept still hold water in our society today? Yeah.
I kind of feel that, you know, there's a lot of the other countries that require some kind of service of their youth.
Okay, yeah.
As they're getting into manhood, getting on to or womanhood, and getting on to raising families and all of that.
Right.
And I always thought, you know, in my mind, and I never served in the military, my mind was always, you know, there's a lot of things that I like about the military and the way it works and the way it's done and everything. The only thing is I don't want to shoot anybody and I don't want to get shot at. You know, and if they had something that required people to maybe spend a year working for their country, doing things like in the parks, doing things that we really can't afford to pay the normal wages, and it wouldn't be the normal wages,
So a different
But
idea
it was a service
of
type of a
natural
thing.
play.
I think it would be a great asset for both the people involved and for the country in general.
Absolutely. I like that. Yeah.
Right now, I've experienced people from AmeriCorps in the park, so there is a similar program now like that, and they're out building trails, things like that.
Absolutely. I'm glad I was waiting to see if someone would bring that up.
You also have your interns that are here that are coming in and working.
Absolutely, yeah. AmeriCorps is maybe a similar modern equivalent, not on a massive scale, and certainly not mandatory.
Another thing about the CCC that I remember reading was that when they weren't working in the evenings, they could take classes.
Yes.
We have a huge number of people who are badly undereducated when they leave school. And the idea that if you wanted to, we're not talking about people who don't want to do it, but if you wanted to join something where you could get a job skill, improve your literacy and math skills, I think there's lots of people that would take it.
Absolutely. There were educational components. You could even take an art class in some CCC camps. They all had different educational options, which is really neat. Yes, you had your hand up a few times.
I want to hitchhike on what she said. The 3 C's was focusing on teaching manual skills, how to work with your body, how to build and do that kind of thing. We don't need that skill level anymore. The reason we're not fulfilling a lot of the jobs that are out there today is because the skill levels aren't there. We would need to ratchet it up to a point to where we're teaching computer skills, math skills, communication skills, those types of things. Now we're preparing that generation for the jobs that we need to fill right now.
Okay, absolutely. I'm hearing that, the CCC prepared people to maybe be a carpenter or, a bricklayer, working outdoors, and those skills might not serve our young people the same way they did then. Absolutely.
The only problem is there is a shortage of those now.
Right.
That's it. There is a
Well,
shortage,
then
and
perhaps
not everybody.
People need
Not
to do this.
everybody is, is made for
Mm-hmm.
college. College level and things like that, and therefore you find a skill set, and you need carpenters, you need plumbers, you need electricians, you need all those skill sets.
Absolutely. All right, well, folks, we are out of light, so I would encourage you to continue this conversation. This is a pressing question to me as well as many other people. I would encourage you to keep talking about it, and if you are interested in some more information about the Civilian Conservation Corps here in Cuyahoga Valley, I have a site bulletin that I would be happy to distribute if any of you would like any more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.